Hi everyone, welcome to the Menzies School of Health Research podcast series for the NT Youth Health Summit initiative called Youth Choices, Youth Voices, where we aim to hear from young people and specialists about youth health priorities and issues affecting young people's health in the NT. A special shout out to our sponsors for this event, including Hot North, Charles Darwin University, the Northern Territory Government, NTPHN, Bridging the Gap, Ironbark Corporation and Chart Air. I'm Sarah Clifford, and on today's episode 9, I'll be having a chat with Youth Ambassador Shanley Marsden. A 21-year-old Arrernte woman, Shanley was born in Alice Springs and grew up in Nhulunbuy. She's one of 5 siblings, so she's very used to sharing. She works for Congress as a health information officer and is passionate about young people having a voice. Welcome to the podcast, Shanley. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
So I gave a very short bio about you just then, but can you tell me a little bit more about yourself? So where you've grown up, what are you doing now? How did you end up in the role that you're in?
Yeah, no worries. So I'm 21 years old. I just turned 21 about a week ago on the 8th. I grew up in Nhulunbuy up in the Arnhem land region. And so I went to school there for a while, and once I turned 12, we moved to Alice Springs. It was a big change for me moving from a small community to Alice Springs. And I know a lot of people think Alice Springs is tiny, but from moving from Gove to Alice Springs, it felt like I moved to a city. So all of my family lived in Gove with me. So I have 2 older sisters, an older brother and a younger brother. And when we moved to Alice Springs, my older brother came, my older sister came, and my younger brother came. And my other sister moved to WA.
Oh, amazing. I'm from WA. Whereabouts did she move to there?
Wickham.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'm from Perth.
So I guess once I moved to Alice Springs, I was still going to school. After I finished school, I started working with Bunnings for a bit. And after that, I got my first job with Congress as a records officer. So I archived all of their documents, I archived all their medical files and all their everything. And then I got the opportunity to become a health information officer. So I'm currently taking over maternity leave for another lady, but I've learned so much within this role, and the amount of people that have jumped to support me and help with my professional development within Congress it's amazing.
That's wonderful to hear. It's so incredible when organisations are able to support young people in their career development. So you talked about growing up, first of all, in Arnhem Land and then in Alice Springs. So Arnhem Land, obviously very remote, Alice Springs remote. How important is it that young people in these locations have access to the same services and opportunities as those in urban communities?
It's so important that they get the same education and that they get the same services that other bigger communities get. And I think growing up in a smaller community, you don't really get much education around mental health. So coming to Alice Springs and learning more about mental health and what it consists of and what you can do to better help yourself and the people around you was a big learning curve for me, because I guess I didn't really learn much about mental health in a smaller community.
And what do you think the kind of major challenges are for young people who are living in more remote locations? And what do you think are the best ways to improve these challenges?
Yeah, no worries. So I think there's just not enough available services or maybe enough available education. And I think there's a lot of shame around going to see a professional about either health problems or mental health problems. And I guess in a smaller communities, there's still such a big stigma around mental health. So I guess more education within the schools of where to find these services, and just emphasising that don't be ashamed. Go and see someone. Yeah.
So in addition to your job with Congress, you also work with Headspace as a youth advisor, and Headspace provide mental health support for young Territorians. So
Yeah.
you mentioned shame. What do you think are the other barriers for young people in accessing all services, but particularly mental health ones?
Like I said before, I think there's a lot of shame around mental health and education as well. I think education's a massive thing within the schools, and just making young people aware of all the services they can use. Like you can use Headspace, you can use other services that provide mental health services to you, and it's all confidential, and just making sure that younger people understand that their information and their medical information is all confidential, and you can go get the help that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that the confidentiality is more challenging in smaller towns?
Oh, definitely, especially because you've got a lot of families in small towns as well, and a lot of families tend to work at the same health services that you tend to go to use. So, yeah, just making sure that when you're going to use a service, that they're educating you on how secure and private your information is.
Yeah, that's really important. And we're hoping young people and service providers listen to these
Yeah.
podcasts. And I think that's a really important message for service providers who are working in smaller towns.
Yeah.
So thinking about like young people who might be listening to this podcast, if one of your friends was to come to you to get some advice around health and well-being, you work for Congress, you also work for Headspace, you're pretty well placed to give advice. What advice would you give them?
Don't be shame, whether it's about your physical well-being or your mental well-being. Don't be shame, and if you feel like your questions are silly, they're not. Go ask them and get the answers that you feel like you need, and be a happy and healthy you, and do that for yourself.
Love that. That's really positive advice. It's wonderful.
Thanks.
Now, before we wrap up, I hear you're a self-confessed hoarder of plants. Can you tell us about your plants and any tricks you have for growing them? Because I kill all of mine.
Yeah, no worries. So I got into gardening and plants because I struggled really badly with my mental health growing up. So finding something that helped me, like gardening, was such a massive thing for me. Just getting in the garden and repotting plants, even if they don't need repotting, I'll do it anyway. They need new pots, even if they don't need them. And just sitting in a patio with a bunch of plants, with a cup of tea, is it's therapeutic, and it feels good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have any other self-care tips while we're talking about that? Plants is obviously a huge one for you. Is there anything else that you'd recommend for someone who's maybe having a little bit of a hard time at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm a big journaler, and I've had a diary ever since I was younger, and you can do them up, spice them up, make it into a bullet journal, make it exciting for yourself, and yeah.
I love that. I tried bullet journaling and I'm just not neat enough for it, but maybe I'll give it another go.
It.
Well, thank you so much, Shanley, for joining the podcast today. Before we wrap up, do you have any final message that you'd like to share with young Territorians?
Like I said before, don't be shame, and break the stigma around mental health. Go and speak to someone, and go ask the hard questions. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's so important that we hear from young people right across the Territory, not just in Darwin. I know sometimes we can be a bit Darwin-centric. That was the 9th episode of our Menzies School of Health Research podcast series, the NT Youth Health Summit Initiative, called Youth Choices, Youth Voices. Thank you again, Shanley.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
If you can, please support the Youth Health Summit Initiative by getting in touch via the Menzies School of Health Research website. Thank you for listening. Please join us again next time.